Hello everyone, this is Rohit. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Identity Navigator. Since the last time we spoke, I have had to do some shopping because I am going to be seeing my extended family next week, so I'm very excited about that. I was also suggested a Nintendo game. I think that's called Stardew Valley. So hopefully I'll purchase it after recording this podcast. So really looking forward to checking that game out. Uh, Also, after the last episode, a few of you reached out to me via LinkedIn and email. So thank you for doing that. First of all, I really appreciate it, and did ask me about I want to do something similar. I want to start a podcast, or I'm looking to do something similar or something which is outside of my job. Right? Some people wanted to start doing lead code. Some wanted to have TikTok started for IAM, and there were a lot of good ideas, but they were not able to do it. Right? They have been thinking about it for a while, and they were like, "What made you do it?" and what would you suggest me to do? So first of all, I am not an expert in this. I am trying to find my discipline as well, but I'll tell you one thing that have always helped me and hopefully could help some of you as well. So we always see time as an infinite thing, right? Like we'll get to it, I'll get to it. But there is this concept for 90 years calendar, or simply put, right? Like if I just look at the average age of our listeners, which is like 30, right? You could be 20, you could be 40, you could be 60, doesn't matter. But let's say somebody is in 30s, they want to be productive for another 30 years and don't want to work after that, or maybe record a podcast or have a lead code or create a TikTok or write a blog or whatever, right? You want to work for next 30 years. Now, there are 52 weeks in a year. So let's take 2 of them out just so that the math is simpler for me. So that means in 10 years, you would have 500 weeks, and in 30 years, you will just have 1500 weekends. Right? That means you just have 1500 more weekends to pursue your passion. And 1500 goes fast. Like, this is Sunday when I'm recording this podcast, and this would be over tomorrow, right? So it would be 1499. After I visit my extended family next week, it would be 1498, right? So that made me realize that I really don't have the amount of time that somehow I convinced myself that I had. And that could be essentially explained in much better ways, but this is something that have always allowed me to not procrastinate and start on things. Another thing that has really helped me out is perfection is the enemy of progress. All of you have heard it. It's not my thought. I wish this was my thought, but it is not. So don't worry about this. We spoke, or we talked about this in our last podcast as well. Don't get into that toolbox fallacy. Don't think about making it perfect. If you want to do something, just go ahead and do it. And some of the podcasts that I have heard and which are like super famous, the first episode sucked, and I'm being very candid about it. But they just made it happen, and then they are today some of the most famous and successful podcasters out there. So 90 years calendar, time as a finite quantity, and don't worry about perfection, just think about progress, and you'll get there. But thank you all for your message. I hope this helps some of you a little bit, but do let me know if you found this advice worthwhile. Now, coming to today's topic, it's something which is very close to my heart, and the topic is about how do you run an effective identity and access management program. So IAM team always seems to be stressed. They are typically over budget or lagging behind in terms of the deliverables that are expected of them. So we will deep dive into the nuances of running an effective IAM program. We will uncover how to strike the perfect balance between business security and audit, keeping the employees engaged and thus laying the foundation for a resilient and agile identity and access management program. Now, what makes me an authority on this subject? Absolutely nothing. Some of you know that I was a consultant for close to 15 years and then have been in the industry for last few years. And I have been fortunate enough to look at hundreds of IAM implementations and programs. And these observations are based upon what I have seen. You might relate to some of them, you might be neutral about some of them, and you might hate absolutely some of them. And that's all right. The purpose here is that are we being intentional in running an IAM program? And if the answer is yes, then you have a way of running an effective IAM program. But if you are not being intentional about the things that you are doing, then we can really start to look into making your program more effective. Now, what does being intentional means? Being intentional means that you are doing the things intentionally, which is like the worst definition ever. But I'll walk you through some of the foundation stones that you really need to look into. And once you have thought through that, once you have designed that, once you have put some thought into that, that would make you intentional about how do you run a program. So first off, we need to treat identity and access management as a program rather than a project. So I've seen at some places, identity teams are fragmented. That means provisioning is some other line of business, and privileged access management is in some other line of business, and consumer IAM is in some other line of business. Now, it might make sense for your business. But if you are trying to create a holistic solution across your enterprise and provide a seamless experience to both your employees and your customers, because remember, in some of the businesses, your employees are also your customers. In order for us to be able to provide that seamless experience to them, not have point solutions implemented, we need to treat identity as a program. So I don't care about reporting relationship. All I care about is your team, are your architects working closely? Do you have an architect community where an architect from the PAM team and an architect from the IGA team and an architect from the CIAM team can really sit down and discuss as to what they are working on? So if you are creating a safe design in CyberArk and you have designed it in a way that every safe will have 4 Active Directory groups behind it, have you really spoken to your directory services team about it? Does your design takes into consideration the things that they have identified as their principles in terms of group parent-child relationship, group nomenclature, and any other things, right? Group ownership, for that matter, any other metadata that they are associating with that group. At the same time, does this group lifecycle management, or have you thought about group lifecycle management with your identity governance and administration team? So you might think about, okay, I'll create a safe and I'll create some groups. I'll populate those groups. But what if the safes no longer applies? Are you going to delete that? What if I need an additional group associated with that safe? So, and those lifecycle management processes or the groups, the AD groups, is that aligned with the group lifecycle management that your IGA team has defined across the enterprise? Right? Are your groups going to be exposed in your request catalog? It could be ServiceNow for all I care, right? Is there a nomenclature, and is that nomenclature accepted by your IGA team? So these are just some or minor examples, but focus on the fact that treat identity as a program and not as a project. Because designing one component of it really impacts all the other components as well. when you define your safe, about more than Active Directory or group membership, you will also have to go through a compliance process, a certification process. Do you think your IGA team can import that data that you have created without much of a heavy lifting, without too much of a data transformation taking place, and things like these? Second thing that you need to consider is, what is the identity of your identity team? Now, why do I say that is, one of my previous bosses and my very close friend is a CISO at a bank, and she's currently running a smallish IAM team. So the identity of her identity access management team is very different from another industry colleague that I just was introduced to, and he runs a team of more than 300 IAM professionals. Right? So the first team is very different from the second team in terms of what they are solving for, or what is their identity within the enterprise. So for your team, can you really quantify or describe or define a few basic questions? Why do you exist? What problems are you solving? Why are you solving these problems? What happens if you do not solve this problem? So I have found this framework of asking 5 whys being very effective while defining the identity of your identity team. Now bear in mind, refrain from using buzzwords and just cut to the chase while going through this exercise. We can always say things like, we are here to streamline and enhance and rationalize and this and that, but let's not use buzzwords. Let's really say as to, why does your identity team exist and why is it needed? So define the identity of your identity team, your mission statement and your vision statement, and all your subsequent strategies should be based upon these. But once you identify your identity, that is where we start defining our value to the larger enterprise. Another thing which is very well known, most talked about, but most of the places suck at, is the team culture. Now, anywhere you apply for a job, anywhere you carry out a job, anywhere you are interviewing, right? The thing that is always being talked about is the culture. But all of us know a team culture could be very, very different from the enterprise culture. Or sometimes the culture defined at the company level, the team might not be able to interpret what that really means. So it's a common saying, or saying that I actually like, is culture is omnipresent. If you don't define it, it defines itself. Now, I am no expert in defining a culture, but I have really found the Netflix culture document. If you are not aware of it, please Google it and you would find it. It is, according to a lot of people, the single best document that came out of Silicon Valley. And define that. Use that document as the foundation stones. I have personally adopted a lot of them in the teams that I have run. Things like freedom and accountability, bias for action, and most importantly, don't be a jerk. Now, you might want to define something very different. You might want to adopt exactly what your company's culture is, and that is absolutely fine. There are only 2 things that you need to think through when you are thinking about culture. A, you have to identify what your culture is, and B, you have to live it every day, because otherwise it's just words on a PPT or a piece of paper or SharePoint site or Confluence. That doesn't really mean anything. You have to live it every day to make sure that it is understood by all and then lived by all within your team, especially if you are a people's manager, especially if you are at a position where other people look up to you. You absolutely have to live it every day, right? So when I say don't be a jerk, I have to live that value every day, because I could not be a jerk 99% of the times, but that 1% of the time that I am a jerk, that is what my team notices. Okay, moving on. The fourth point of running a very effective identity and access management program is continual hiring. And this was introduced to me by my mentor. His name is Jim. I intentionally am not calling out his full name because I have not really taken permission from him, but he's pretty awesome. And I'm very lucky to have him as a mentor. So if you don't have a mentor, find one. Now, the thing about Jim is there is this thing, where people feel proud that, oh, I'm mentoring or I have mentees, and it has become an it thing. Like, you need to have a mentor or you need to have a mentee because that is what defines an executive leader, right? Jim is not like that. He doesn't care, but he really does care about helping me out, talking me through things, helping me look at things in a different way. So, Jim, I don't think you would be listening because you are too busy for this. But if you are, thank you very much. Now, this is the concept that he actually taught me recently, was continual hiring. So you like it or not, there would always be attrition in your team. So your privileged access management engineers would leave, or some of them would leave. Your people leaders or managers would leave, right? So the concept behind this is, don't wait for somebody to leave to open up another position. We'll always do that, but if you come across as somebody who is really, really awesome, hire that person. And trust me, I have run the numbers within my team. The budget actually equals out, because let's say somebody was hired at 100K and 100K is the budget. Now, they leave, you are able to hire a replacement for them 6 months down the line. So that means you are only going to pay for this position 50K. You are saving that 50K. This 50K can go into a continual hiring of another awesome PAM engineer that you recently interviewed. So have those positions open always. Have those generic positions always open. And if you come across somebody who is an absolute superstar, you hire them. Now, this is a bigger sell because you would have to maybe change your company processes, but something that you want to look into. Again, this is not a must for running an effective IAM program, but I've seen that with the amount of talent that there is out there, we really need to be competitive, because we need people as much as people need us. We are seeing that companies have a little bit of upper hand right now because of the economy, but 2 years back we were seeing that candidates were getting multiple offers and when some of them were given insane amount of money. So this is a cyclical process. This would always happen, but we need to make sure that we are a place where we do not lose talent just because we don't need one right now. Because believe me, and you know this, is you would need one very soon in the future. Now, as an IAM program, what are the things that you should absolutely have? So, do you have these 4 documents? A, do you have your service catalog? Service catalog is a document that identifies the list of services that you provide to the organization. So can you quantify every service that you provide to the organization? And trust me when I say that more than 90% of the IAM leadership teams cannot do that. Now, how are we supposed to sell something if we don't know what our products are? So identify and document all the services that you provide to the organization, and that would be your service catalog. Second thing is control solutions. If I'm an application developer, I don't want to learn any more about OAuth than I absolutely have to. So if you as an IAM team can give me a document that makes my life simpler, is well published, the document is adopted across organization, that makes my life simpler. And what that remediates is that point solution or exceptions being placed all over the place, because now you have a published pattern of how to use your Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. Now you have a published pattern of how would you create safes within CyberArk, or how would you create groups or users in Okta, or how would you create credentials within your HashiCorp solution. Because if you do not have a published way of doing it, that means everything is a fair game. And that is why we have so many patterns and technical debts and historical knowledge, because those control solutions are not published. Another thing is standard operating procedures. How are those things done on a technical basis? How are the engineers who are doing it? What are the steps that they are following? This is really required because you do not want the knowledge to be lost if an engineer leaves the team. Second, sometimes an engineer might feel stuck because they have to do that day in and day out because nobody else knows the process. So they might feel stuck in their career and start looking outside. And then you also want to create those efficiencies. So if you have a well-documented standard operating procedures, can you maybe transfer it to your L1 support? And that is where standard operating procedures come into place. And last but not the least is roadshow deck. Because you might be very passionate about identity and access management, but the team may not, or the mainframe developer may not, right? You need to have a roadshow deck in which you take out, or which your executives or leaders take with them to showcase what is it that you are doing. This will include the identity of your team, your service catalog, a link to your control solutions, your work intake model, and anything else that you might feel would help the audience in understanding the value that you bring to the organizations. The next up, the sixth pillar of running an effective IAM program is strategic partnership. An IAM leader or an executive or an engineer or whatever role that you have in the IAM team, we are all salesmen within our company, right? If you are an IAM executive, you have to act like a customer relationship manager for your own org. You need to have that strategic partnership with different leaders across the lines of businesses, because they don't understand IAM. You take that roadshow deck, you have those lunches or coffee with them, and make sure that they understand what your team is, what it does, and when it needs to be included. That brings me to another point of you need, if in case you are leading an identity and access management team, you need to understand identity and access management. Because if you are in a room, you have to be able to identify the opportunities where IAM team can help, right? So let's say there is a meeting happening in which you as an executive is invited, and that meeting is about creating a data lake. Have you thought about the identity concepts around that? How would identity team be included in this? So your understanding of identity and access management is really important. Now, I don't want you to be able to configure Azure Active Directory or configure SailPoint, but you should be able to understand this is where IAM team can be involved and can add value, right? But most importantly, have that strategic partnership, have that strategic lens in place. Be nice to people. Say hello to them in the hallway because you are a customer relationship manager for your own organization. Another pillar is your work intake model. Now, I've seen that at so many places. IAM team is doing their own thing. Now, business wants you to do something, but you don't have time to do it. And then business will not stop for you because you don't have time. So they would go ahead and implement their own solution. Right? You don't know anything that nobody else in the business knows. This might result in creation of shadow IT teams, shadow IAM teams, bad implementation of IAM, or sometimes even waste of money because you have multiple instances of that Okta because you were not prioritizing the ask from the business. So make sure that your product runway has that transparency. It is published to the business. Right? Whatever work intake model that you have, I'm absolutely fine with any that you use, but you have to make sure that are you able to match the velocity of the business? And if not, then it would be rough for you to get their buy-in because the business makes their impression really, really quick. If they come to you 3 times and you are not able to help them out, probably 4th time they are not going to come to you. Because they have their own deadlines, they have their own priorities. And we need to really understand that. So irrespective of the work intake model, what you need to focus on is how do you match the velocity of the business? I have ideas around that. I would be happy to discuss with any of you about that. But that would be going too much into the delivery models. And we will probably take that up in one of the future episodes of this podcast. Another pillar is resource management. Right. Now, I'm not saying resource management in terms of making sure that everybody is happy and everybody is feeling included and things like this. These are all part of the culture document that you have created and live every day. I'm talking about maximizing your resources in terms of engineers should engineer. Now, as simple as this is, there are so many meetings. Everybody is sick of it. What are you doing to get rid of some of those meetings? Right? How are you maximizing or how are you ensuring that your engineers maximize their time in doing engineer related activities? Right? Are your managers truly engineering managers? Right? Are you inviting just a bunch of people in the call because why not? Right? So meetings are probably a low-hanging fruit that every one of us care about. But ensure that you are maximizing your resources. You don't want people to be creating roadmaps in an Excel file. It's just a waste of time. There are so many road mapping tools out there. You don't want your project managers to manage a project within Excel. Although I absolutely love Excel, but there are better tools out there that do allow them more flexibility in terms of auto-populating or auto-generating some of the dependencies. So maximize your resources. This could be how the meetings are set up, to how the information flows through, to what are the tools that you are giving them, how the information flows through your organization. But you have to make a distinct choice and a plan of how you are going to do that. The last fundamental pillar is really important. So we have spoken so far about what's your identity, what's your work intake model, how do you maximize the resources, and how do you match the velocity of the business. But these are all carrots. You also need sticks. And what are the sticks? How can you make people do something? Because you would absolutely need, in so many cases that I could think of, you would absolutely need people to do something that you are telling them to do. If they are using LDAP, you want them to use LDAP S. If they are using TLS 1.0, you want them to use TLS 2.0. If they are using bad authentication, you want them to use modern authentication protocols. So what are your sticks? And your sticks are your standards. Do you know what your IAM standards are? If not, please go through them. Identify your standards. Identify who owns it. More often than not, you should be owning it. And then use those standards to make people do the things that you want them to do. Audit teams are sometimes seen as not very friendly, but make audit your friend. Audit teams are there to support. Make audit those sticks. So you need to have a sticks and carrots approach to that. However, beware. Any business case that is created based upon an audit finding, if it is a bigger initiative, it will fail. Now, why do I say that is, if you have an audit finding against somebody and they have to do it, and this pressure really comes from top down that they have to do it. So the top line is that this is a cost. And if that is a cost, then we have to minimize it. And that is why business cases based upon these sticks are always seen as costs, and cost needs to be minimized. So you might plug the holes this year, but next year when you are going and asking for additional funding to make sure that those holes are not visible anymore and are looking pretty and there are no cracks in the wall, you won't get the funding because you would lose that prioritization race against all the initiatives because the holes have been plugged, my friend. And that is why if you are creating a business case, create a business case based upon what the business wants. How are you enabling the business? How are you enabling the work that your company does to generate revenue? And not just based upon a security finding, because that would get flagged as a cost, and costs needs to be eliminated. Okay, so I hope some of them made sense to you. I really do. I'm very passionate about how to run an effective identity and access management team. So if any of you want to discuss further, if you have a question, please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, or you can also email me at theidentitynavigator@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate that you gave me some time of your day. Till next time, this is Rohit, your identity navigator.